teacher who comes in with a problem? Are we going to change their nature, or are we going to do something else?
Yeah, it's an excellent point, and I felt with Fergus he was becoming more of himself, and it was not about sexual orientation, it was about, he was someone who values, he's someone who values human connectedness, and that's what he was looking for, and that was more important to him than anything else. Just connecting with another human being in a way that felt genuine, honest, and caring. And when he found that Bill was able to meet that, then he was completely committed to that relationship.
Well,
That's how I,
right. Well, I would think, that if a person joins a military cause, out of a deeply held belief, that they're bound to find in certain moments that the deeply held belief may find itself in conflict with other deeply held beliefs. I mean, I think soldiers have to struggle with that all the time, because in order for you to be a soldier who was trained to kill somebody else, you have to learn to dehumanize the other person. And you see that struggle taking place during the hostage situation, where they know that there's a problem, because because his humanization of the hostage is going to make it very difficult for him to kill the hostage, and in fact it did. And that's real. So, in war, you have to train people to be different than they would be in other situations. And that has consequences, and we're seeing a lot now, returning veterans, with all kinds of post-traumatic stress disorders, because most of them are reasonably, decent people who are seeing and being exposed to things, that they had not really planned on. They got more than they bargained for, when they enlisted and they went to fight a war. Anybody working with veterans these days here? Our invisible wars. Yes?
I'm impressed how it showed how the homicidal impulse quickly shifts to the suicidal impulse. And how in these school shootings where, like Columbine, they really had a strong suicidal impulse that got expressed in the killing of other people.
Right.
And somewhere I read statistics about Vietnam veterans, that among Vietnam soldiers, they had as many people kill themselves as were killed in the army, killed by the enemy.
50,000 suicides?
They had 43,000 or something like that.
I've not heard that figure. But how many people thought that Fergus was going to kill himself? I didn't. I didn't remember the ending of the movie when I saw it 20 years ago, so I thought much. So it would have been, so since it's certainly a credible idea from our understanding of how violence can turn outward and inward. Other reactions?
You touched on it. To ask you more, the word pretend, our use of illusion, fantasy, I don't even remember exactly where it came up. The woman, male figure, not good at names, Dill, said, even if it's not true, tell me you'll stay with me forever, pretend. And I think within this commitment and loyalty, there's also some issues about how do we construct, whether it be from dissociation or other kinds of just simpler actions in life, structures that we're not sure whether they're pretend, real, and how we find stuff is sorting out. It's just that word pretend, and I wonder if you have any more thoughts about it.
Well, I mean, the postmodern perspective is that there are no objective facts, and that everything is socially constructed. And so the notion that there is a reality which is objective and can be completely agreed upon is a fiction and a fantasy. Some people are just more able to do that, and they know that they're doing that, and they don't care. You know, it's not a problem for them because they can have a moment where they can believe in that moment so like for example, you know, for example, Fergus has Jody as a prisoner and is saying to Jody, and Jody's saying, you know, you're going to have to kill me. And Fergus saying, no, that's not true. Now, who's, you know, I mean, it seems to me that Jody has a better grip on reality at that particular moment than Fergus does, but Fergus doesn't want to believe the reality of what, you know, of what is going to happen because they're not going to negotiate, you know, with terrorists. It's very clear. I mean, that's the policy at the time.
Well, that dialogue sounded very similar to, you know, this scenario where you've got someone who is dying in a hospital and the other person saying, please don't say that, you're going to make it,
You're gonna make it.
There's always hope.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Denial.
Yeah.
Well, I think he's being supportive, and I think he knows that he will be killed. I thought he did.
Well, it's a script.
Yeah, I thought he was aware that it was be kind.
Well, I mean, it is a script. My feeling was that Fergus was in a kind of conditional role. He was a volunteer, and he needed to prove to the IRA that he had the wherewithal to do what was needed to be done. They were testing him. And meanwhile, the prisoner, I think, was playing a game to try to save his life.
The volunteers is actually the
Yeah.
name for a subset of the IRA. So
Yeah,
they're not volunteer in the sense of that
He's
word.
a
I think
member.
when he was a volunteer, that he was a member of,
Yeah.
because the IRA is actually composed of several different political organizations.
But
and
he
one
was-
of the oldest goes back to World War II, and they were the volunteers because it started out as a voluntary regiment in World War II for the Brits, actually.
Right, no, that's
So I don't think he meant volunteer in the sense of the way we think of the word volunteer.
Yeah, but he was still, it seemed to me, that they didn't trust that he could do it, regardless.
Because of what happened,
Because of what was transpiring.
Right.
And what I found interesting throughout the movie, what I wanted to say was what I found interesting was actually the nitty-gritty of the negotiations between different characters around like consenting with one another about what was the nature of that constructed reality going to be. Like, pretend with me. You know, I'm not coming upstairs. Okay, but you have to kiss me. It did remind me of therapeutic negotiations with people who have been severely traumatized, where there is a process of constant consenting and discussion as to what the nature of the discourse is going to be, and how close are you going to get to difficult realities, and how much are the two people together going to stay away from them in order to maintain a certain kind of state of affairs or to maintain a kind of pretend reality. And that the process of change over time and the transition into a new reality, like you described Fergus having a new reality over the course of the movie, is really gradual and has to be done carefully and often with explicit consent.
Well, that may be true, but I was thinking more of courtship rituals.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. I mean, there was a certain degree of, you know, sexual ambivalence between the two players, and so that it felt more within that bell-shaped curve of non-traumatic experience where people, you know, are trying to pretend, you know, that they don't know how far they want to go. They want to go. They don't want to go.
Yeah.
You know, the sense of agency gets passed back and forth between the two people. Who's in charge in this moment? Which, by the way, I thought the way culminated in that fantastic bondage scene at the end. You know, which, you know, we moved from the hostage bondage to what is traditionally seen, you know, as sexual bondage. You know, she tied him up as if it was, you know, going to be a sex act in the bed. So I think, you know, what do people really want? You know, is the masochist really the slave of the sadist, or is this really a shared motivational system, but they divide up the desires separately between themselves? It's just another way of thinking about it. Now, is there any reason why psychiatrists would be interested in a movie like this? I mean, I didn't pick the film. I mean, you know, the LGBT community thought this would be